Hello! You may have noticed that lately I'm making videos against the famous arguments for God. And it is only fitting that here I should recommend a book written by a YouTuber, the delectable This Was a Triumph. And the book is The Craiging. You will find a link to his video where he promotes the book in the description. While I'm recommending books, I want to recommend to you the book that I last read. I haven't finished it even. How Mumbo-Jumbo Conquered the World by Wheen. And of course, I will recommend again, I think I will not leave you in peace until you read this short book, Jacques book, Chance and Necessity. It is actually an essay on natural philosophy. In the book, he rightly says and explains very well why science should be trusted, because it is based on the principle of objectivity. And William Lane Craig has read this book. He does not dispute that.
The French biochemist Jacques seemed to echo these sentiments when he wrote in his work Chance and Necessity.
Probably that is the reason that for decades already he is not relying on only describing the Bible, but he uses science for his arguments for the existence of God, one of which I'm tackling in this video, and that is the cosmological argument. In answer to a question from the public about the hiddenness of God, why God does not show himself to us so that we can all believe in him, Dr. Craig says,
obviously, God could make his existence or Christ's existence more evident than he has. He could have the stars spell out God exists in the sky.
Could he? Could he, Dr. Craig? Dr. Craig never explains any mechanism by which God could have created the universe as we observe it now. He only deals with the Big Bang. Scientists do not know details what happened prior to the Big Bang, although they have many hypotheses. So Dr. Craig declares that God has created the Big Bang, but he never explains any mechanisms how God has created the universe as it is now. And the universe as it is now is very different from the universe as it was at the Big Bang. There was only plasma then. There were no atoms and neutrons and protons.
So this is a very brief summary of the Big Bang cosmology. It says that the universe as we know it began in a big explosion, which we call the Big Bang. Yeah, here time goes from bottom up. This explosion occurred not at some particular place in the universe, but everywhere at once. And at that time, the universe was filled with extremely hot and dense and rapidly expanding fireball of elementary particles and radiation. As it expanded, this fireball cooled down, and in about a couple of minutes, it was cool enough for atomic nuclei to form. And then it took about 1 million years for these nuclei to combine with electrons to form neutral atoms. And at that point, the universe became transparent to light. So we can now see light, radiation coming to us from this primeval fireball.
He could have the stars spell out God exists in the sky.
Apparently, Dr. Craig has not read the statement made by Sir Arthur Eddington about the second law of thermodynamics. If someone points to you that your pet theory of the universe is in disagreement with Maxwell's equations, then so much the worse for Maxwell's equations. if it is found to be contradicted by observation, well, these experimentalists do bungle things sometimes. But if your theory is found to be against the second law of thermodynamics, I can offer you no hope. There is nothing for it but to collapse in deepest humiliation. Which is strange, because I found this statement in Roger Penrose's book, The Road to Reality, a big book full of deep physical science. I could hardly understand anything. 1,099 pages long. Anyway, Dr. Craig quotes from this book when he's talking about the teleological argument that the universe couldn't be like that if God didn't make it. He says that it is impossible that our universe has arisen as it is now by chance, and then he quotes from Roger Penrose, who says that he is dealing only with the question if we have only one universe, what we observe, and it came about only by chance. And he says that Roger Penrose says that it is more probable that the universe is randomly formed than being formed as it is by chance.
Roger Penrose of Oxford University has calculated that it is inconceivably more probable that our solar system should form by a random collision of particles than that a finely tuned universe should exist.
Dr. Craig doesn't give the page where he found this quotation, but apparently he neglected to notice on page 730 where Roger Penrose ridicules the idea of a creator making the universe. He calls it a fanciful story. But let's look more closely to Dr. Craig's statement. He has dismissed the possibility that our universe, what we observe, which he calls the only thing that exists, the only universe, that it has come about as it is by chance. When he talks about the other possibility that scientists have promoted lately, that there is a multiverse, there are many other universes than ours, then he says that, but that is not possible because it is a greater possibility that the universes will be randomly formed. But what does a randomly formed universe mean? The second law of thermodynamics states that particles will disperse, and statistically the disorder in their arrangement will be greater than at the start. So, but scientists at the time of when Boltzmann lived, which discovered this the second law of thermodynamics, all had an objection and said, well, but this is not a law, it's only a description of how particles behave. And they said, well, it is possible, given long enough stretch of time, that in the universe all particles may spontaneously arrange themselves in the form of a brain. And this troubled Boltzmann and the other scientists, but it is also said that if this happens, and the second law of thermodynamics does not forbid it, then this brain will be observing something completely different than what we observe now. There will be a greater disorder in the rest of the universe, or an empty space, because there will be such a great order, this brain. That would be a very low entropy. And that is why in the rest of the universe there will be a lot bigger entropy, and it will be in disorder. So a randomly formed universe is in analogy with this Boltzmann's brain. This is the thought that the universe might have come about as a result of the second law of thermodynamics, given a long enough stretch of time, and all particles could arrange themselves as what we observe now. But this should be a universe at the size of the solar system, and if there are observers in this solar system, they would observe a lot more disordered space around them. Okay, that is true. But William Lane Craig incorrectly says the same thing, randomly ordered universes, when he's talking about another theory, very true theory by scientists lately, which talks about the multiverse. The multiverse, the scientists do not say that it will be comprised of universes that are randomly formed. No. They are explaining universes coming out of the quantum vacuum, for example, or string theory, brain theory, or the M theory, when there will be other universes in different dimensions, and that is why we don't notice them. So these are not randomly formed universes. These are not universes as an analogy to Boltzmann's brain. Dr. Craig is lying here. He knows very well, because he has spoken of the forming of a multiverse from the quantum vacuum and other mechanisms, and then he talks about them. And so he knows what that is, and he knows exactly what he means when he says randomly formed universes. That is in an analogy to Boltzmann's brain.
In order to rescue the hypothesis of chance, theorists have been forced to postulate the existence of a world ensemble of other universes, preferably infinite in number and randomly ordered, so that life-permitting universes would appear by chance somewhere in the ensemble. Not only is this hypothesis, to borrow Richard Dawkins' phrase, an unparsimonious extravagance, but it also faces an insuperable objection. By far, most of the observable universes in a world ensemble would be worlds in which a single brain fluctuates into existence out of the vacuum and observes its world. Thus, if our world were just a random member of a world ensemble, we ought to be having observations like that. Since we don't, that strongly disconfirms the hypothesis of the existence of a world ensemble.
Instead of anthropic principle, we can adopt what I call the principle of mediocrity. And this is to say that, okay, there are some observers living in different kinds of bubbles, and let us assume that we are typical among those observers. Okay, we can ask what a typical observer, that is the observer whose numbers who are more numerous than other kinds of observers. If we figure out what a typical observer will observe, what values of the constants of nature such an observer will measure, we can then make a prediction that this is what we expect to measure. That involves the assumption that we are unexceptional in the multiverse, that we are typical. But this is an assumption that has been very fruitful in cosmology, and so it makes sense to adopt it. This strategy has been applied to the energy density of our vacuum, which is also called the dark energy or the cosmological constant. And in fact, the prediction was successful, although very few people believed in it at the time when it was made. So this may be our first evidence that indeed there exists this huge multiverse out there.
One last thing. Let's look at this statement. God could arrange the stars to spell God exists. This could happen only by natural ways. The second law of thermodynamics does not forbid that. This could happen. God has nothing to do with that. But the stars could spontaneously arrange themselves in this complexity, this low entropy, in the phrase God exists. remember the analogy with Boltzmann's brain. But in that case, if this does happen and there is an arrangement of stars in the sky spelling God exists, that would mean that all around this complex there will be disorder. That means that we would not exist to observe such a sentence written in the sky. A second possibility is that we would be part of this arrangement of stars, but that is also not possible because this is very low entropy. A phrase, God exists. And the rest of the universe is in disorder with very high entropy. And it is not possible that a complexity like ours would form in one of those stars, in a planet, by one of those stars. That is absolutely impossible. So I think that we should put a stone on the grave of the cosmological argument and the teleological argument. The teleological argument, Dr. Craig himself has refuted it already by saying that he is open to the possibility of multiverse existing. That means that our universe is not unique, so we cannot say that only God must have created it. No, if many other universes exist, then one of them is like ours. The cosmological argument starts pushing up the daisies also because it is connected with the teleological argument. If our Big Bang is not the only one, then we don't have any beginning of the universe, of the multiverse, only a beginning of our observable part of the universe. But it arises not from God, but from the quantum vacuum, for example. We don't know of any beginning of that quantum vacuum.
Now, wholly apart from the fact that there's no independent evidence that such a world ensemble even exists, the hypothesis faces a devastating objection. Namely, if our universe is just a random member of an infinite world ensemble, then it is overwhelmingly more probable that we should be observing a much different universe than what we in fact observe.
He could have the stars spell out God exists in the sky.
That means that we would not exist to observe such a sentence written in the sky.
Just a random member of an infinite world ensemble. Now, wholly apart from the fact that there's no independent evidence that such a world ensemble even exists,
I'm very, very open to the existence of a multiverse.
Bye.